Listen, I lost over 35 grand US in my first year of running an e-commerce business due to product quality issues. And that's why I invited my friend Sajak to discuss ways to minimize your risks when it comes to product quality. Sajak is going to share his own journey from the times he originally started selling physical products online to the times he actually moved and lived in China dealing with local manufacturers. We also cover some mental health issues that entrepreneurs have to deal with sometimes, as well as resources that help Sajak grow his business. So if you're selling physical products online, be it on your own website, Amazon FBA, or any other marketplace, you'll find lots of golden nuggets in this conversation. Let's go. Sajak, welcome to my YouTube channel. Thanks again for making time to chat with me, share your story, and tell us what you're about. I want you to start with sharing with everyone here who you are, what are you doing, and what brought you into the e-commerce space specifically.
Hey, Andre. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, and really excited. Hope anybody listening will find this useful. But yeah, so I started in e-commerce quite a long time ago, actually. It was about 7, 8, 9 years ago. And I started originally on eBay. So I was buying stuff online, reselling it on eBay. And that's kind of how I got started into Amazon, into e-commerce. And then from there, what ended up happening is that I kind of realized I needed a more stable income, something more reliable.
Right.
And a lot of what I was selling was kind of junk. So I was like, wow, I can definitely do, a lot better than some of these products that that I was buying wholesale at the time. And I went ahead and started my own e-commerce brand. And I started that brand on Amazon first. That's kind of how I got started into Amazon, and it grew pretty fast. So our first year we did 40K, second year we did 1 million, and third year we were on track to do 2 million that year. But unfortunately, just started having a lot of quality control problems and whatnot. And that's when I actually started Movley. So that's kind of been my journey through e-com.
That's awesome, man. Well, before we jump into Movley and everything you do right now, tell us why in the world would someone like you in a pretty early age decide to take the entrepreneur route and not a traditional career, like a corporate job career?
That's a good question. So I guess there's a lot of things to do with that. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs have a chip on their shoulder, and likewise, I kind of had a chip on my shoulder as well. And my chip was that I always kind of saw my parents going to work. They were working 9 to 5s, and they would leave super early in the morning, 7, 8 a.m., and never see them. And they'd come back at like 6, 7 p.m. Again, so I'd barely see them. And then at that point, the day is almost done. You do a little bit of homework and whatnot, and that's kind of what the feeling I got was, relating to like 9 to 5s and doing jobs and whatnot. So I kind of always wanted to be able to set my own schedule. And I also saw, with my parents as well, like there was so much in the world to see. And they didn't really get a chance to see much of it. And I really wanted to be able to travel, to be able to kind of do whatever I wanted to do and really enjoy, my youth, I guess. So that's
Right.
kind of what led me down entrepreneurship, because it was really one of the only paths where I can set my own schedule, set my own terms, and I can also build something that has a really big impact. So it's not like I'm working on something that has an impact, but I'm able to build something that has a much bigger impact than what I can do as an individual or just working as part of a project.
Yeah, good reasons right there. Another question here is, what was your very first business? How did you start? What was your entryway?
Yeah, my very first business was actually, I would say it was probably Minecraft. Do you know Minecraft, the game?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that was my first business. So when I was in middle school, high school, I used to be a huge Minecraft player. I used to play like literally morning to night. At one point in middle school, I literally played for like 2 days straight, morning to night with like a 4 or 5, 6 hour sleep break and then back at it again. And I used to do that like a lot. And at some point, I was like, well, I'm enjoying this. I enjoy doing this. And, I feel like whatever I enjoy doing on this, the games I enjoy playing, the people I enjoy playing with, these guys also enjoy this. And that's when I was like, okay, hey, maybe I can make some money with this. And I started hosting Minecraft servers, and that was my first business. So
Okay.
it was actually really funny because we had like, now I'm thinking about it, we also did things like we do in Amazon, which is like influencer marketing. So I actually remember posting on forums, hey, we'll give you like a free world on our server. We'll give you like a free space if you promote us and use us in your videos and things like that. So we were like
It's pretty
using
cool.
that as a method of promotion. And yeah, so that's kind of how I started, just kind of Minecraft and things like that.
But hey,
Uh,
how do people really make money playing Minecraft? That's how you started, like just playing, right? Who pays for that?
Yeah, so it's really through servers. So on servers, they have operating costs and they need to run. And when you're running like a gaming server, I'm sure if you're familiar with gaming, you need some crazy, crazy specs. And at
Right.
the time, we're talking crazy specs now are like, insane specs back then. And so, we were talking like thousands of dollars of like monthly operating costs, at least 100. You need like about 100,
Right.
200 just to run like a small server. So servers would generally ask for donations. And it was
Mm,
almost like donations, but not really. You would actually like donate to the server, and in return, you get some perks or whatnot on the server. And then the server makes some money to pay off its bills, to pay off its fees, and then you also get some cool in-game perks. So that's kind of what we do. We used to sell in-game perks on the server, and we literally at one point had people paying because the server was full. So there's like a slot limit. We had like at one point 20 people in the server at a time. We had so many people on the server at all times that people were paying $5, $10, $15 a month just to be able to join the server when it was full.
that's
So
pretty awesome.
that's like an example of an in-game perk.
Okay, so you have to invest in your hardware basically, right? And have people promote so others join your server and actually use it so that you get those donations, right?
Exactly.
And was it overall net positive? Like, did it make sense? And how old were you back then?
Yeah, so back then I was like probably 11, 12, 13 years old, something like that. So it wasn't really trying to be like net positive, but we were net positive.
So that led you into other games with physical products later on, right? At what age did you start selling online?
Yeah, so I started selling online, I think it was like high school. So like maybe when I was 16, 17, 15,
Okay,
14, 16.
mostly eBay.
Yeah, that was first was eBay, yeah.
Gotcha. And what kind of stuff were you selling?
Just like stuff. I did a little bit of RA originally. So
Mm.
actually, I started with OA. I started with wholesale because what happened is I used to go online and I used to search. I was actually at a mall and I was kind of bored. I was went with my mom. She was taking hours to shop, and so I actually went up and I was just kind of chilling on the bench there. And I started searching for cell phone cables because I needed a cell phone cable. My charger was broken, and so I went up. I searched cell phone cable, and I found out when I did high to low, I could buy like 100 cell phone cables for like $200, and then they were selling individually for $4, $5, $6, $7 a piece. And I was like, damn, well, this sounds interesting. So that's I actually went ahead and bought. I think my first I bought like 100 or 250 or something like that cell phone cables, and bought all of those, and I started selling them on eBay, and I sold through all of them in a week. So that's kind of how I started with eBay. And then from there, I did a little bit of RA too. So I'd used to go out to the store, I'd find some cheap stuff and just resell it online, and just sell stuff around the house too every now and then. But for the most part, just buying in bulk on eBay and then reselling on eBay.
Okay, Sajak, you're already using some advanced terminology here. Can you explain everyone what's OA and what's RA and what's the difference?
Yeah, OA is when you buy from a wholesaler. So you're buying from like an existing brand or an existing vendor
So
that's
that's
getting
online
products.
arbitrage, right?
Exactly. Online arbitrage, and also called wholesale. And then RA is retail arbitrage, where you actually go to stores, you buy products from there, and then you resell them online. And then my Amazon brand, the one I started after that, was PL. It wasn't really PL. PL stands for private labels. When you create your own products with your own logo and sell it online. We didn't really create, we didn't just put our logo on products. We actually built our own products. So we had our own custom designs, stuff like that. So I wouldn't say it's PL. It was more of just like our own brand.
Yeah,
But yeah.
cool. So why did you decide to segue into building your own brand and not just continue doing what you were doing originally?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So for eBay, it was up and down. So like at one point, our wholesaler ran out of inventory, or the price got jacked up, and then it wasn't really super profitable, but we still did it. And then it would fluctuate on inventory, things like that. And then on the RA side, RA is just completely unreliable. That's not like a business, just kind of like a side hustle, like a side hobby to make a few extra dollars. So that was not really sustainable. So I
Mhm.
needed something that was more sustainable, that could keep going, and just kind of sustain itself in a way that I could sleep and I could still make money. And that's when I kind of transitioned over to PL, more of building my own brand, because I saw that was possible with brand building
Right. So with
specifically.
your own brand, you went to China right away to source your products.
No, so I started sourcing products just off Alibaba initially, and we ran the business for about a year and a half before I actually moved to China.
Okay, so you ordered online from China. Okay.
Yeah, so I
Now,
ordered online through Alibaba.
gotcha. Big question. Why China and why most stuff is made in China? Can you give us a little bit of overview, maybe a little bit of history, like why China is the manufacturing place of the world?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I don't know too much about the history side, but what I do know is that in terms of China, China is really powerful when it comes to manufacturing because first of all, they get subsidies. So when you ship items, like when you go on eBay, you'll see items that are cheaper sold and shipped from China than you can even ship from the US. So like minimum shipping for like a small package in the US is like $3 or something. And you'll see items being sold on eBay for like 150, $2 shipped and delivered to your house. And one of the reasons for that is there's a subsidy for Chinese and developing countries for them to be able to ship items from their countries over to our country.
So
And
basically, Chinese government backs their manufacturers in order for the economy to grow, right?
It's actually the U.S. government, if I'm not mistaken,
Also,
that
the US
acts.
government supports China.
Yeah, it's through like
Okay,
a
tell me more.
WTO. Yeah, it's through one of the trade agreements. It's for like all developing countries, and China still fills the framework as a developing country. That's actually one of the things I think Trump was trying to get removed when he was in office. China does actually still is still classified as a developing country, I believe, from that agreement. So
Uh,
we're still subsidizing their packaging. So it's either I think it's the U.S. subsidizing their packaging,
it's
but
pretty
the
cool.
Chinese government does subsidize as well. I
Right.
know that too. So there are subsidies on both sides, so it's really efficient and really cheap to manufacture in China. And the other cool thing about China is, as more countries started outsourcing their manufacturing, started going to China because that happened to be the most attractive destination at the time. And now, what's so powerful about China is because all these countries have outsourced for so many decades, almost every product you can consider, whether it's a handmade product, it's electronics, every product can be manufactured in China. China essentially has a manufacturing hub for like every single type of product you can imagine. And no
Right.
other country has that robustness, even like India, Vietnam, the US. Every country generally specializes in its exports, whereas China just exports everything, which is crazy.
That's very true. Like, yeah, when I was looking at my first brand and I looked through so many products just to analyze the costs, pretty much anything can be made in China. Not
Yeah.
everything is the best quality, but most things are. They can replicate like everything you can think of. Like Apple seems to be the best quality computers you can find, and they're made in China too, right? So yeah, it's pretty impressive what the country has grown into in the last decade or two. Now let's get into your story with China. I know at some point you decided you had to move there and live there and deal with the local manufacturers. Tell us about that and why, like, what's the reason why you decided that it's a good idea to actually be physically there and build your business from China?
Yeah, just as you mentioned, so China can produce any quality, and you have Apple at the top end, which is a really good quality. And the reason Apple is able to get such good quality is because they do their own engineering, they have their own quality control inspections, they have their own teams, and they very carefully monitor and verify every part of the manufacturing process, even though their suppliers are contracted. But on
Mhm.
the other end of the spectrum, you also can get pretty much the crappiest products you've ever seen. Those are the products that you buy and they break on the first use, or you buy them and they're not even like the product you ordered. Those products also exist, and they're also extremely common. So that's kind of what happened also in our case is that our suppliers, we worked with some of the best suppliers in the industry. A lot of them were doing competitors for, products for our competitors. And
Mhm.
what ended up happening is that on our first few suppliers, we got pretty lucky. So we were going, 1, 2 years, it was pretty fine. And then into year 1.5, into 2 years, we started gradually seeing a much higher issue of quality control. So products were breaking apart after a few months of use. We had like dead on arrival units that were just broken when they arrived, and it just gradually got worse and worse and worse. So it was not something related to packaging. It was not something related to shipping. It was just a matter of fact that the quality was going down. And in addition to that, we started expanding into other SKUs and we started talking with other suppliers and things like that. And we were getting a little bit of cold feet because the funny thing is we were doing inspections on all of our orders ourselves, and we were still getting past inspections, getting defective products. And so what ended up happening is as we started to expand as well, with some of the new suppliers we were talking to, we were getting bad quality from the get-go. And again, despite past inspections, working with good suppliers and paying a pretty decent amount of money for the products we were
So
building.
just to clarify, Sajak, you had your own team of inspectors in China when you were there that work
Yeah,
only
so
for you.
Yeah, so I hired them after moving to China. So I ended up moving to China and I lived there for 6 months. And while I was there, I was doing my own inspections, essentially
Right.
working 12 to 16-hour days at the factory. Did my own inspections, was meeting my own manufacturers. I had a translator for some parts, and was just kind of living there, kind of understanding what we were doing. Our brand was doing like 1 million a year at that point, so it was able to sustain me
Right.
and operations. And then at that point, I started noticing a lot of the quality control problems that we had, and those were issues that we were not finding in our inspections, but I was finding myself. And at one point, I literally hired a third-party company, and these guys were a very reputable multinational company. They came to the factory, and the inspector showed up 5 hours late, demanded lunch, and then proceeded to do a super rudimentary inspection. And when I dived more into the processes and stuff, which I've been doing for several years now, what I found out is there's a systematic failure in the industry to do good inspections just because of the way the process is built and the way the companies work. But even before that, before diving into that, I ended up hiring my own team in China, as you were saying, Andre, and we had a couple of full-time people out in Shenzhen. We had an office there. We opened a WFOE. It's called a wholly foreign owned entity. And we actually had those full-time people start taking bribes from the suppliers and forming too close relationships. So it just all hell went loose. We had fraud, we had bribes, we had all kinds of problems. And then the whole business essentially just shut down because of that.
So you were following the inspector staff and just checking yourself as well, and you could find issues that they just ignored, basically, right?
Yeah, it's not even just ignoring. Like some of them ignored it, but like it was more so on the sense that they wouldn't even do it. Like for example, we'd in inspections, you should have something called a product test. You know, no matter how simple your product is, whether it's like a paper cup, maybe you fill it up with water, make sure it doesn't leak, or it's more electronics, you plug it in.
Hmm.
Every product has product tests, and they're classified as function tests. There's another type of test which is called product conformity tests. Conformity test is when you actually look at multiple different products and compare them to each other and make sure they conform to specifications and also are conform to each other. So there's like uniformity between the different products. And if you go to like some of the top rated inspection companies, literally on their website, they publish that they only do 1 unit for function test or 3 units for function tests or 1 unit for product conformity or 10 units for product conformity. When you're comparing 10 units together out of like a batch of 1,000, that's not statistically significant. It doesn't mean anything. And
Right.
if you're testing 1 unit for function, how do you know the other 999 are not, are working too, but they'll
Right.
still pass the inspection? So that's kind of the issues that we were seeing. And there's a lot of problems when it comes to the process, when it comes to verifying. And, there's a QA process for the inspectors too, but these companies were doing QA without their own QA. So there's a lot of different problems.
Crazy. So now you live in China, you build this new inspection process trying to improve your business operations to make it all work with all the quality issues. And you went there by yourself, right? You didn't go like with somebody else from your team or like any, I don't know, team members, relatives. It was pretty much you in China in a new country, completely different culture. How did it feel? How did you go through that challenge? And I believe you lived there for like half a year, right?
Yeah, I lived there for about 6 months, and
Yeah.
it was definitely a challenge. So
Tell
first
us
time
more
I,
about you dealing with that, because I can see how challenging it can get. Um, yeah, go ahead. Tell us what your experience was living in China and dealing with the businesses.
yeah, so first time I went to China, I actually went with a relative. So I took my
Okay.
uncle, and so he stayed with me for the first month I was there in China, first 3 weeks or so.
He's
And
not Chinese though, right?
he's not Chinese, and yeah, doesn't speak Chinese at all either. So it's completely new to him. But he's like 50 years old. So when he came with me, everybody thought that I was working for him
He's the
instead of
boss.
him just
Okay.
instead of him just checking, just checking out what I'm doing and kind of hanging out. Everybody thought he was the big boss, and I was the one doing all the talking. I was the employee, so that was a really interesting dynamic. But yeah, so I joined my uncle for the first few weeks, and then after that, I actually hired a translator locally, and I would pay him every now and then to help me with translation, things like that. When we go to a lot of factories, I'd bring him along, and he would translate with the factories, work with them, things like that. And then later on, I ended up actually hiring my own team there.
Whole team of mostly inspectors, right?
Not inspectors. So we had engineers, we had mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, we had inspectors, we had general manager, office
Okay,
manager. So yeah, we had like a full operation going, like a supply chain manager.
that's pretty awesome. All right. Well, and that team, when you're working with them, all of them are Chinese. What was your cultural experience like? Is like how different is it to work with Chinese and you're the boss, or even when you're not, when you're just working with a factory? Tell us about some cultural differences and what things Amazon sellers or anyone who sells online should keep in mind when they source from China.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of culture, there's definitely a lot of cultural differences. So I mean, one thing just right off the bat, you'll notice copying products in China is viewed as almost like it's almost like viewed, it's viewed as a good thing, not as a bad thing. Like
Oh,
it's
really?
built into the culture. It's like if I copy your product, it's like me basically telling you I really liked your product. So for you, it's like almost like a compliment, even though I stole your IP. So they've essentially turned stealing IP to compliments, and so
Pretty
that was
funny.
like one thing that was very different. Another thing that was really interesting is that, in general sense, like the people there are very nice and everybody's very welcoming, very nice. When I spoke to factory owners, the factory owners would come to my hotel to drive me to the factory. We didn't even know there were factory owners because sometimes the factory owners didn't speak English. They wouldn't bring a translator. And when we get to the factory, we'd meet a foreign sales rep that speaks English and also speaks Chinese, and we find out that the guy who drove us from the hotel to the factory, sometimes it was the driver, sometimes it was the factory owner, taking their time out, coming out to meet us. So the people there, and in general sense, like factories, everybody there is extremely nice,
Okay.
and it's a lot more hospitable than what you would see in like the U.S. or in other business environments.
So they go above and beyond to serve their clients because their business basically depends on guys like you, right?
Exactly, they're very welcoming, very nice. When you meet them, you want to hand them your business card with two hands instead of one
Right.
hand.
And
And when you go to new factories, they'll actually give you a presentation. They'll walk you through the factory, what they do, how they do it. They'll give you a tour. Just very, very welcoming, very, very nice people in general.
Yeah, very true. Like you mentioned this business card handing, when people hand you business card with two hands. Uh, that's one of the things we experienced here living in Vancouver too, because on the West Coast, specifically in Vancouver, it's heavily Asian-dominated culture, and a
Mhm.
lot of people are of Chinese descent or like straight up immigrants. And I found that too. Like they handed these business cards to me that way. I'm like, why is it with both hands? You know, like is it something that they have in their culture? But I guess it's probably them showing respect that you actually matter, right? Is that what the
Yeah,
case is?
exactly. It's a sign of respect. Like I have your full, you have my full attention, that
Right.
kind of thing.
Interesting. Okay. So you're in China, you're dealing with all this stuff, you're trying to survive there because your company has some clear issues. And I know it's not a unique situation that you only had to go through once. Like I had some challenges when I was building my first e-commerce brand, and I'm sure whoever's listening to this is most likely an entrepreneur, and they go through some tough challenges from time to time that most people would never understand. And I feel like mental health is not being addressed enough for entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs tend to eventually make a lot of money, and general public treats that as, hey, here's your compensation, what do you want? But technically, sometimes you see that whatever you do is figure outable, right? It's doable, and we're known for having the right mindset to make things happen. But at the same time, how do you deal with loneliness? How do you deal with uh, not being understood or pretty much being the only one who really is responsible for so many things that impact other people's lives? Like it's somebody's jobs, it's somebody's products that are supposed to improve somebody's lives. And like, do you feel that pressure and what do you do with it?
It's a good question. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely pressure, and you have to learn how to live with it. I definitely think, if you're at a point where the pressure is too much, just let go of it. Uh, to be frank, I just don't think about it. I like to kind of just remove it from my perspective because if it's not something I can control, it's not something that I can change, without like altering my entire career path or lifestyle, etc. Then there's just no point stressing about it. So I just like to take a no stress, no worries type of approach. So like when it comes to like a general sense, like, with, for example, like just day-to-day stress, hiring people, stuff like that. First of all, make sure you're in a really good position before you hire anybody. So you're not always stressed out about cash flow. You're not stressed out about burn, things like that. So kind of just make sure you're in a good position. That's number one. The second thing is that, once you're in a good position, if it's a solid position, you should have like 6 months of runway before anything happens. All your expenses are paid. You don't really have any issue. The second way to kind of deal with that is meet more entrepreneurs. So some of my closest friends are actually entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs are kind of, they think differently. Every entrepreneur is very unique, but in a general sense, the common traits I see are that, number one, they're ambitious, they want to grow, they want to develop, and number two, they like change. They like things changing. The good ones, they like change. They like to learn. They like to see different things. New things. They like to adapt. And most people are not like that. So if you always want to go to a new place, new destination, check out new things, most people are not going to support you with that. So some of the best friends that I've made are also entrepreneurs because that's kind of, they share some of their mindset. And I've also seen like workations really good for that. So, going to travel, going out with a couple of friends, traveling for a few weeks, few months, doing like a workation, those are really helpful
Right.
in
Is that
terms
what
of
you do right now?
yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing right now. So I'm actually in LA for December with two other friends of mine. And yeah, we're just kind of hanging out and checking out a new city, a new place, meeting new people, and just working also while we're at it. So it all just kind of works out and keeps everybody engaged. So that's what I feel is very important is in a general sense, is just keep yourself engaged, keep yourself entertained, keep yourself, don't silo yourself off just because you're working. So don't work, 16-hour days and then come out of it 6 months, a year later with, no friends, no activities in the middle of the city. Uh, you know, it's a balance. So focus on that balance. I'm a huge hater of the culture. Just grind, grind, grind. A hustle mindset doesn't help you succeed. It might help you get through 1 or 2 years of your life super quickly without noticing what went by, but after it's done, you've done more damage to yourself than you've helped.
Very
So
true.
it's more about a balance.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. It's basically work hard and play hard, but also work smart, right? You
Yeah,
don't need to employ yourself 24/7 and take all the juice you have in your life and put it into the business. There are smarter ways to do it. There are other people who are eager to help, and it's usually you end up with a better product, better service if you involve other talents who are better at something that you're not, right? It's all
exactly.
about win-win-win and collaborating and thinking of creative ways to solving the problem in a better way, more efficient way, right? And it's usually not grinding more. It's usually doing more efficient things instead,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, my favorite line is "pay to get rid of headaches."
Right.
So I would much rather be in a business that makes, let's say, just in a hypothetical, say the business makes 10 grand a year, rather be in a business that, makes 10 grand a year and gets me, zero stress than a business that, makes me 100 grand a year, but keeps me always stressed out. So, you have some type of entrepreneurs that's always like, hey, I have to go do accounting. I'm going to go do an accounting course. I'm going to learn accounting, spend 20 hours doing that. And then I'm going to do my own accounting to save, $100, $200 a month. At that point, forget it, just pay the $200, don't worry about it, and, focus on what you want to focus on. And if you can't, then, put in a little bit extra juice. But if that, that threshold to be able to like get rid of all the stuff you don't want to deal with is too far away, then might be time to focus on something else.
100%. And quality inspection is definitely something I don't want to do myself ever. But
living in China is not the easiest thing.
I know. And I can actually relate to your experience in China a little bit, not because I was in China, unfortunately I wasn't yet. And I think it's generally a good idea to visit if you're dealing with Chinese manufacturing for your business. Would you agree with that, Sajag? Would you say that an average entrepreneur who sells stuff from China should at least visit their factory and get to know them?
Yeah, definitely. I highly recommend going to China. You don't necessarily have to, but I would definitely recommend it if you have the ability to, to go there for a week, 2 weeks, check out the manufacturers, meet other factories in the region that you're evaluating, and just kind of learn the ecosystem, learn the culture, make that personal relationship with, your suppliers that you're already working with. That can be really powerful. So I'd highly recommend doing that if you can.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. That's definitely on my bucket list because feels like I'm missing out really. But my experience was with Ukraine, actually, my home country, because one of the product lines I had in the business I just sold is made in Ukraine. And my original manufacturer, not the one I passed with the business, but the original manufacturer caused some issues back in the day. It was actually the very first year of me operating the business. I think it was 2018 summer. And I started receiving lots of emails and 1-2 star reviews all of a sudden. People basically saying, hey, your product is defective, we can't use it. And it's a scratch off map. People basically couldn't scratch it. They were like, oh, when I scratch it, I damage it, or it wouldn't scratch if I don't press hard enough,
Oh, wow.
So I could see that it's a huge issue for a scratch off map not to scratch, right? It's the basic utility, right?
That's a function test right there.
Exactly. So I didn't really have proper inspection process in place back then. And frankly, I didn't understand the importance when I was starting out. I was like, oh, I can trust this person. They say they do everything properly. They inspect products themselves, which is always a red flag for you if they ever offer, right? But what ended up happening is we sent all of the inventory from Amazon warehouses. So we removed everything to a warehouse in New York. I had some people inspect everything for me after the fact, basically to tell me, hey, there's the real issue, right? I wanted them to confirm if it was just a few or it was a systematic problem that we had to solve, right? And they did find the issue was basically 10 to 15% deficiency rate. But the problem was, you don't know that it's not scratching well until you scratch. And as soon as you scratch, the product is already used. It cannot be sold as new.
Mm-hmm.
So it basically means 100% of that inventory is lost. And at that time, it cost me over 35 grand US in total with all the shipping, all the inspections, and even sending all of that inventory into garbage at the end of the day. It all costs money. And to me, it was like everything I had in the business and even more. Mm-hmm. And funny enough, a few weeks later, I got laid off. I lost my job. So that was a fun time to recover the business at that point. So to me, after going through all of that hell, for lack of a better word, I can see a huge benefit in having proper inspection process in place. And that's basically what we did. I had to hire someone locally, and it's not that easy in Ukraine. The infrastructure is not built that way like it is in China. Like there are hundreds of different quality inspection companies in China. In Ukraine, I couldn't find anyone when I was searching Google. So I found someone who was like, oh yeah, I can do this, good person with the right attitude. So he did manage it fairly well. He helped me develop proper system, and we worked closely with the manufacturer to actually build something that would basically eliminate that issue moving forward whatsoever. Like it just can't happen, which I'm happy that I did that, because later on I had much larger orders and it would have been even more costly, right? So it did lead to me improving the business process overall and the quality of the product and ensuring that I can sleep well at night. But at the same time, I lost trust in that manufacturer. And as soon as I could, I switched to a different one just to know that, hey, they would care. Because what happened with the previous one, they were like, it's not our issue, it's whatever, the container was hot, and that's probably why the scratch coating became super hard, right? And like, to me, it was clearly not the issue, because we sell these maps all over the States, and let's say Phoenix, Arizona gets pretty hot, and we never had that issue before, and it gets hot even in January, right? So it wouldn't be the reason. And I could see that some other seller who was sourcing from there had the same issue around the same time. So it was clearly in their hands. but they never said that, hey, yeah, we take responsibility, we'll recover the costs, right? They did help a little bit, but not enough to compensate for me being out of stock for like 5 months. So to me, it was a huge loss, like monetarily and brand reputation wise. That was a huge devastation. But fortunately, I had an asset to sell, which was my townhome, my own home, to recover the business, and I don't regret that because now I sold it and I definitely profited well enough to pay for all the struggles I went through. But tell us about the numbers. So just to give a proper outline, Sajag is leading a cutting edge inspection company, so quality inspection company, and you guys deal with China and India now, right?
So right now, just China, but
Just
we're
China.
working on expanding to a bunch of other countries.
Okay.
So we're actually trying to streamline and basically remove as much of the human aspect as possible. Even though we're a
Good
human
stuff.
business,
Yeah, let's
we're
talk about
working.
numbers. Let's talk
Yeah,
about non-human elements and how would someone justify paying substantially for a proper quality inspection, and why not save on it?
yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, just in a general sense, like for example, with Movley, like a good inspection in China, a well-trained inspector makes between $13 to $19 an hour. And that's for your average inspector. So we're not talking like engineer inspector. We're not talking about like electronics engineer or something like that. Those could be 3, 4 times higher.
Right.
But for an average inspector, they're earning between 13 to 19
So
dollars an hour.
13 to 19. That's definitely not what Americans expect Chinese to be paid, right?
Exactly. Yeah. People think that, labor in China is $3 to $5 an hour. That might be the case for, Chinese speaking only, just basically robotic labor at the factory. But for a bilingual inspector that's going to be doing a quality control inspection is going to be determining, whether it's your $1 grand or your 10 grand or your 100 grand order is going to pass or fail. You want somebody who has, the right skill set. And that kind of labor costs between 13 to $19 an hour to obtain. And that alone on an average inspection, there's no way to really do a good inspection under 5 or 6 hours for even the most simple product batches. You have to open up enough units, you have to inspect enough units. That takes about a day. So most inspection companies charge by the day. And with a 1 day inspection, you're spending about $100 to $150 just on inspector labor. And that's $150 on inspector labor. Then you have to factor in travel costs, accommodation, fraud and bribery auditing, training costs, administrative costs, and obviously a margin for the inspection company as well. So when you add in all those costs, you can pretty easily calculate that a good inspection should be costing over $300 at the very least.
Okay.
And the inspection companies that charge like 115, 120, can kind of just estimate on your own. What is the quality of inspection and the quality of labor you're going to get in that price?
Right.
It's not going to be much.
So how do they still make money then? Do they save on the time? Do they save on quality of their talent, or what's the case there?
Yeah, it's actually a couple different ways. So the first way is they hire inspectors by just saving on the cost. They hire worse qualified inspectors, especially inspectors in China, and this also happens in Russia and other countries, even India. A lot of people will accept underpayment for a job. So market rate might be $15 an hour. I'll accept to work for $10 an hour, but then I'll have this like chip on my shoulder that, yeah, my company's not paying me as well. They don't really care if I do a good job or not. I'll just make it up with bribes from the factory because this is a job that allows me to do that essentially. And
Okay.
the company's essentially turning a blind eye because they're paying me under market. So that's like one way. They just let the inspectors make it up on their own. And the second way that they do it is actually telling inspectors, you'll tell you as a client, hey, we'll send the inspector for up to a day. But then they'll tell the inspector, hey, you have 2 inspections or 3 inspections to do every single day. And they'll put it right next to each other as much as possible. Even if it's right next to each other, China's spread out. So, we're talking about an hour and a half transport time between 2 factories. That's the reason we don't do 2 inspections in a day, because when you factor in that hour and a half, an average day of 8 hours, you're only left with about, 3 hours per inspection, which is not enough to do anything good.
Right.
But take into account 3 hours to do an inspection. They go to the factory, they're given an 8-hour inspection to do, and they're given 3 hours to do it. So the inspectors at that point just make up results. They just kind of go really quickly through the products. And that's another reason why most inspection companies only test 1 to 3 units for function or 1 to 10 units for product conformity, because those are the tests that actually take time. Those are the tests that matter. So they just skip those altogether. And they just say, yeah, we'll visually look at them. And visually looking at them is not enough, regardless of the product that you have. So like with Movley, for example, we actually estimate the time of every inspection in advance. And we pre-quote that based on every test, every thing that needs to be done. If it's going to be 200 units in the inspection, we don't just choose an arbitrary number that, hey, we can inspect these many units in a day, because depending on how detailed we're going to go with each unit, how many tests we're going to do on each unit, things like that, it can dramatically change the time. So that's kind of the second way that a lot of companies make it up. But even those cut rate companies, they make a lot of money, and their margin is generally 30 to 40% on still like $110, $120 inspection. Just from all the measures, because if you're doing 3 inspections in a day, you're still earning 360, 370 for the day. and you pay your inspectors, underpay them, do whatever. As a cut rate inspection company, you can still make a lot of money. In fact, Movley would probably make more money in the short term operating like a cut rate inspection company than the way we do currently.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about what you do differently, and specifically what I'm curious to hear about is that human element that you mentioned, bribery. So what happens when an inspector gets a payment on a table? How does it affect results? What are the cases you've seen, and what are the risks for entrepreneurs to go and hire cheaper inspectors?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when it comes down to like the overall fraud and bribery, a lot of people have this misconception that it's like this zero sum game. So you pay the inspector $100, they'll pass the inspection, and that's not necessarily the case. Theoretically, you don't even need not even theoretically, in reality, you don't even need a bribe to bribe an inspector. So I'll give you an example. So I went to the local foot doctor here where I live, and it's a suburb of Chicago.
Love this story.
So I went to this foot doctor, and this is the first time I met him. Super nice guy, and I have flat feet, so I probably needed some orthotics, which are things that go in your shoes to help you with flat feet. So I went to this foot doctor. I met him. We had a really good conversation, and kind of told him, hey, I'm having shin pain, whatever I was experiencing. And we had a really good conversation for 20, 30 minutes. He asked me what I do. We were talking about his career, his life, kind of how he got to where he is, how I got to where I was. And we just had a really good conversation.
Pretty much became friends, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And had a very friendly conversation. At the end of the conversation, we were like, you're a cool guy. I'm a cool guy, that kind of vibe. And he went to the back after that and then got a pair of orthotics for me. And he gave me the pair of orthotics and he said, hey, Sajag, this is what you need. This is going to fix all your problems. And I was like, oh, okay, awesome. He's like, can you try them on? So I said, okay, tried them on. It's like, all right, walk around in it, jump around. And I did all that. He's like, okay, cool. It looks like these fit you. And I was like, okay, awesome. Like, how much are these cost? How do I buy them? And he's like, this is what he told me. He said, don't worry about it. I'm going to give it to you for free. And this is an American guy, this is not China, this is America. And he's an American doctor. And he said, yeah, I'm going to give it to you for free. And I was like, oh, okay, well, awesome. Thank you. And then he says, okay, stay here. 2 minutes later, he came back with a nurse and he said, okay, Sajag, I'm going to need you to follow this nurse out. She's going to walk you out and check you out. And she's going to take you out the back entrance. And I was like, oh, the back entrance, like, what about the front? And he says, oh, don't worry about that. They don't like me giving away shit for free. So we're just going to walk you out the back, and referring to the free orthotics. And I was like, hey, don't worry about it. Like, it's $50. I can pay for it. And he's like, no, I insist. You're not going to leave here without paying for these. What's an extra $50 to, my company, essentially, this billion-dollar hospital. Yeah. Billion-dollar hospital group that employed him. And same exact thing when it happens with inspectors. So an inspector goes to the factory rep meets them, buys them lunch, treats them super nicely, helps them with the inspection. At the end of the inspection, there's like, hey, inspector, look, I have 2 kids, da 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 da. And if you don't pass this inspection, I'm going to lose my job. And the inspector might say, okay, hey, well, I know you're a human here, and I've made face-to-face contact. You've been really nice. And on the other end of this transaction is this billion-dollar American company. What's an few extra dollars for them for an extra few defects on this order? I'll just pass this inspection. Maybe take a bribe from you, maybe not, as kind of like a gift for doing that. But I'll pass the inspection, or I'll reduce it from 5% defect rate to 3% defect rate. So it's just a below pass, or maybe just failed by a smidge, where the company's not going to care. They might do something like that. So that's how fraud and bribery generally works in China. There's a huge human element to it. And like one of the ways that we try to fight against that actually is, this is something relatively new. We're putting it into place right now, is we're actually putting together trainings to make the inspector feel more connected to the overall customers. So one of the things that we've done in our beta trainings is that we've actually told inspectors that, hey, some of the sellers we work with, do hundreds of millions a year in sales. Other sellers we work with are just small sellers, and they're just, doing a few orders, maybe just one order. It's their first order. They put their entire life savings into it. Kind of like you, Andre, they sold their house, they sold their car. And, that's not uncommon. It's very risky. And, they're putting their life savings, maybe borrowed money from friends, their family, their parents, to start a business. And when you're inspecting it, you don't know which one it is. You don't know if it's a newcomer, an individual just starting up, or how big the brand is. You don't know that. So when you're an inspector and you're going there and you pass an order by even 2%, that's enough for the buyer's buyer to possibly reject the order and not be able to sell the product at all. They might lose all the money on the order. And when something like that happens, it's not a billion-dollar company losing a few extra dollars. It's an individual who can't afford to put food on their family's table next week, or has to go back to their parents, their friends, their family, and say, hey, all that money you loaned me, I no longer have it. And the gravity of that situation is pretty steep. So that's kind of the way we like to position it to inspectors and educate them. Hey, clients are trusting you to inspect the products, and they're entrusting you to do that process. And we've seen that take a lot more passion in, we've seen inspectors undergoing that training take a lot more passion in the work they do, and a lot more pride. But it's not obviously just up to that as well. Like, any good inspection company, we also have a lot of processes in place. So I like to say we're not perfect. Obviously there's a human element. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs, and we're not going to be perfect at any given point in time. But I always like to say, with the processes, the procedures, the way we do things, we're about 2 to 3 times more effective. And then we're actually, what I was telling you, Andre, earlier, is we're actually trying to build out like a tech platform, trying to get body camera footage, sync that up to the platform, get data insights, because having a bad inspection is not on its own a fatal problem. Having a bad inspection and not knowing it was botched, that's when you have a fatal issue. So that's kind of what we're trying to isolate against by adding visibility, adding transparency. We already have much better reports. We give videos on all of the tests we do. We get like 40 to 100-page reports on average, and sometimes even hundreds more than that. So we already do a lot more reporting, but we're trying to get even better, give more transparency, more control into the entire process, and get to that 10x level with time.
That's pretty awesome. So basically, in addition to all the technical advancement that you're implementing, you're definitely training each and every inspector on basically building that human connection with the client, who is not necessarily a billion-dollar corporation, explaining them that, hey, it's somebody just like you. They have their family, they have someone to take care of, and they may put everything into this business in order to make it work. If you don't do your job properly, you're basically jeopardizing all their efforts, and they can potentially lose a lot, right?
Exactly.
So I think that's the very important part of the process that you guys implemented there. So I think it's pretty clear to me like what makes Movley different. But if you were to summarize in 2-3 unique things that you've learned yourself and made sure that Movley is better in that way, what would those be?
Yeah, I think the first thing is communication. So a lot of inspection companies, they're like this glass wall. It's like a one-sided wall. So you can always communicate with them, but they don't really communicate with you back. That's one thing that I took a personal issue with, because I had that experience as well. So one of the things that we pride ourselves in doing is we actually have a native English-speaking back office in the Philippines. So what that essentially means is that we allocate the same amount of money other inspection companies allocate to service, but a Philippines back office is actually 6 times cheaper than a Chinese back office. So we're able to give a lot better service for essentially the same price. So when we go through the booking process, whether it's your first time doing an inspection or 1,000 time doing an inspection, we look at the booking forms, we give you suggestions, feedback, we'll ask you questions if something doesn't make sense. When you communicate with us, we actually understand what you're saying, because everybody speaks English, there's no broken English. The reports make sense, things like that. So that makes a huge impact right off the bat on the service quality. The second thing is like actually billing on the basis of real time. So we pre-quote everything, but we have a bill on maximum time guarantee. So if we quote you 2 days and it takes a day, we'll credit the extra day as long as the inspector didn't go to the factory. If it takes 3 days and we quoted you 2 days, we'll eat up the cost of the third day, as long as it's not something out of our control. And then we'll either way improve the time codes the next time around for the inspection, so we can make sure we're not under or over quoting you. That's one of the biggest reasons, and that's actually what allows us to actually not put crazy, or unreasonable time quotas on our inspectors. That's actually what allows us to do that. Is actually estimating the time for each individual test, improving the time codes, improving the inspection, and being, having that flexibility, so that way, we can do that. And the third thing is just, you working with good inspectors and doing a good job. We don't want inspectors that are, whether you have a paper product or you have something more complex, you need inspectors that are passionate about your products. You need inspectors that care, because what I like to say, and we did a basic calculation with this as well, is you have $3,000 of defective products. It could be a first order of $3,000 that's just highly defective, maybe the wrong color, something's not produced. Very common for you to lose all your inventory money. Andre, you had that experience yourself. And how much was your order? I think it was like 35K or something, right?
That's in total lost money. I think it was 5,000 units. So basically 5,000 units, I think it was $6 each plus shipping, and a lot of it was shipped by air. So all of that money just went down.
Wow. Yeah. So like $35,000. If 3,000 pays for 10 inspections, that'll pay for 300 inspections. Essentially, your inspection for.
And it's a very simple math to look at.
Exactly. Your inspection for over a century is paid.
100%.
So it makes a huge impact. So what we always like to say is that $3,000 of defective products, enough to pay for 10 inspections directly. Take into account warranty claims, returns, alternative damage, which your 35K number includes. And your number doesn't even include brand damage or negative reviews or re-ranking, I imagine. Those are additional costs.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when you add in all those costs, $3,000 of goods is enough to pay for all your inspections for 7 years if you do them quarterly, at least, and then it just goes up from there. So
100%.
Pays for itself hundreds and hundreds of times over. So that's why our goal with Movley is just to be as effective as possible while still being efficient. And that's what it comes down to. The higher quality the product is, the better inspector you want, the better the better processes you want in place, because your risk is just much higher. And that's why you want to be doing an inspection on every single order, because it's your last line of defense before your customer gets it.
100%, man. Absolutely agree with you on that. And I'm glad that there are people in the world like you who really like the diligent work that we call quality inspection, because it's not easy to do. And if you have the right process and you have the right mindset, the right approach to business, I think like people like me who just sell their brand products online benefit greatly from that. So yeah, to me, it's just an insurance policy from having any risks whatsoever with the product quality. And I'll include a link to Movley just under this video, this post. But tell us where people can find you, where they can follow your journey, and how do you like communicating with others if they decide to reach out to you?
Yeah, definitely. You guys can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search up my name and connect with me. Additionally, you can just follow me on movley.com. That's really the best way to find us. If you use Andre's link, it'll take you there, and you'll be able to see our homepage and stuff like that. We have a blog, so if you subscribe to the blog, we're actually working on getting more content out, delivering content
Right.
out, on inspections and manufacturing in general, not just in China too. So if you want to hear about that, how to approach sourcing, stuff like that, as we get into that, highly recommend subscribing to that newsletter too. But yeah, I would say that'd be the best ways to follow us.
Awesome. One final question that I always like asking other entrepreneurs is, what books or other resources would you recommend people in the e-commerce world or generally business owners to learn, to try, to find, to read in order to move to the next level? What resources have helped you the most in the last few years?
That's a good question. I'd say if you're early on and if you haven't read it, definitely read it. E-Myth, that's one of the best books to read. It gives you a comparison between entrepreneur and small business. It also gives you a distinction between a job and running a business. Because a lot of people have this misconception that it gives you a difference between running a business and being self-employed, because there's a
Mhm.
pretty big difference. And that might sound basic, but some of the skills and some of the stuff that they teach you there are amazing, and I still use them today in terms of managing employees, managing my operations, things like that. Highly recommend that book. It completely changes your
So it's
perspective.
E-Myth,
Yeah.
right?
And second book that I would highly recommend reading would be Entrepreneurial Operating System. Now, EOS, there's a couple of books for it, I believe. I've not actually read a book on it. I've been reading a lot of small articles and stuff. But based on what I've been getting out of that, it's been really, really powerful for stuff we've implemented as ourselves in Movley. So I'd highly recommend checking that out and taking a look if those can be applied to your business. And that's when you have more employees, bigger team. You have a couple of full-time people, or a couple of people even part-time, and they're working in like core operations and stuff. That's when it becomes really, really powerful.
Gotcha. So E-Myth and EOS, I'll include the links to those books too, just for your guys' convenience. And any final words before we say goodbye, Sajak?
No, I think we covered quite a bit of topics in this video. Just hope everybody listening to this video found it super useful. At least found some sort of inspiration for my journey. It might be overwhelming at first, but it's I didn't know anything going into this, so it's just stuff I've learned on my way, and anybody can learn it just going through the same journey.
Thanks for being here, and let's keep making our dreams come true.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks so much for having me on, Andre.
That was actually my very first recorded interview that I'm hosting. So please comment below to let me know if it was helpful and what recommendations you have for me to improve interviews like that moving forward. Also, the link below for Movley is my affiliate link. If you use it, you'll get a $25 discount for your very first inspection. Give them a try and let me know what you think. I really need that feedback because I want to recommend you only the best services that improve your business and your life. Also, join my entrepreneurship community on Facebook, follow me on Instagram, links below. And if you are in the process of scaling your business for an eventual exit, talk to me. I'm happy to share my experience, connect with my broker, and help you out in any way, shape, or form I can. Cheers.